I chose my affair partner over my sick husband. Now I can't forgive myself. I don't expect sympathy. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. I just need to say this somewhere because it's eating me from the inside out. My name is Maria. Not like it matters, but I'm 32 now. My husband's name is Daniel, male, 33. We were together for over 10 years, married for 7. We met in college. We both went to University of Oregon, and we met sophomore year in a creative writing elective I took to fill a requirement. I was 19 and honestly just coasting through school at that point, undeclared, a little lost. He was 20, already an English major, already passionate about the things I pretended to care about. Daniel was the kind of guy you couldn't overlook in a crowded room. He wasn't the loudest or the most charming, but he had this confidence about him, like he was so certain about his place in this world. The first time we talked, it was after class. He asked me what I thought of a poem the professor had read out loud, and I admitted I didn't totally understand it. Instead of judging me, he admitted he had no idea either. We both laughed about it. I still remember the way it made me feel, like I was alive for the first time. From that point on, we kept talking, saying hi to each other before class became coffee after class, that became walks across campus, then late-night study sessions, then entire weekends spent holed up in his apartment sharing books and music and ideas. Daniel was passionate about so much. He was raised by his aunt and uncle, who were very much hippies. I mean, no shoe feet, flowing garment-wearing, tree-hugging hippies. I met them a couple of times before they passed away. Daniel wore shoes, but he was just as passionate about the environment as they were. I can't begin to tell you how many times he got arrested for some climate change protest thing. He carried that same love and passion into our relationship. I remember one time when I told him offhandedly that I missed the sound of vinyl records, something from my childhood. He showed up a week later with an old turntable he'd found at a thrift store. He tucked a note inside one of the sleeves of a Smiths album I mentioned liking. It said, "I love you. I hope that's okay with you." That was Daniel. If there was a single moment that could sum up who he was as a person, that would be it. We moved in together 2 years later after graduation. At 25, we got married in a small backyard ceremony with all our friends and family. Daniel was working for a nonprofit legal aid center, helping people navigate evictions and custody battles. I had just landed a marketing coordinator role at a local magazine. We weren't rich, but we had enough. More than enough, really. We had a rhythm. Saturday mornings were for record hunting and farmers markets. Weeknights were for takeout and documentaries and folding laundry together while we talked about our day. Nothing flashy, but it was ours. He made me feel safe. I heard stories of people who felt like their partners were just roommates. I never felt like that with Daniel. Our relationship felt like I had a teammate, like someone was always on my side. And for a long time, I truly believed we had one of those quiet, unshakable love stories that other people envied. We didn't fight often, and when we did, we always came back to each other. Our friends all fake gagged when they saw us all wrapped up in each other, which is why it's so hard for me to go to them about this. I fear they won't be able to reconcile what I did with who they know me to be. I think this is a perfect time to say that I love this man. I built a life with him. I promised him I'd be there in sickness and in health, and I meant it at the time. I really thought I was someone who would rise to the occasion if things ever got hard. I was wrong. I ran. We had just started talking about kids when Daniel got sick. It wasn't anything dramatic at first, just fatigue. He started falling asleep on the couch before dinner, missing weekend plans because he was just so tired. I teased him about getting old. He laughed and said maybe I'd finally get a break from his 6 a.m. playlist experiments. Then he lost 20 pounds in a month. He started getting night sweats, like full-on soaked through the sheets kind of sweats. I remember waking up one night and feeling the bed cold and damp, like something had spilled. He was shivering beside me, teeth chattering, trying to laugh it off. We thought maybe it was stress or a thyroid thing. He said he hadn't taken a vacation in years. Maybe his body was forcing one. I made an appointment, and it wasn't stress, it was lymphoma, stage 2 at the time. Treatable, the doctor said. Actually, scratch that. The word was manageable. I clung to that word like it was a lifeline. Daniel did too. He asked intelligent questions at the consults, brought a notebook, recorded the sessions with his phone so we could go back over the information later. He tried to keep things normal at first. He still insisted on making Sunday morning pancakes. Still lit candles at dinner. still left me sticky notes on the bathroom mirror that said things like, "You are my favorite person in the world." He said he still wanted to move forward with the baby plans. "Let's freeze embryos," he said, "just in case." I said, of course. We were optimistic together. In that way people are when they have no idea what's coming. The treatment started, chemo, then radiation. Our lives got smaller but bigger at the same time, seemingly overnight. Doctor visits, pill organizers, insurance calls, side effects. So many side effects. He was exhausted all the time. He lost his hair, then his appetite, then that quiet confidence that used to follow him everywhere. I wish I could say I was strong, that I rose to the occasion like I always assumed I would, but I didn't. I didn't step up. I withdrew. I was afraid, not just of losing him, but of becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone whose life revolved around sickness and survival. There was no space for dreams anymore. The talk of kids faded quietly, like we never really talked about it in the first place. I deleted the baby name list I kept in my phone. He never asked about it, and I never brought it up again. I started resenting the quiet, the smell of disinfectant, the way the nurses looked at me like I was supposed to have answers I didn't, the way friends stopped inviting us to a lot of things, like the illness was contagious, the way I had to watch the man I loved shrink into someone pale and brittle and suddenly so fragile. I missed being touched. I missed laughing. I missed being seen. And I hated myself for that, because I wasn't the one fighting for my life. So I pushed down those feelings of resentment for Daniel and the situation and decided to dedicate myself to caring for Daniel until he got better. And then I met someone. His name was Evan, male, 31. He was a freelance photographer who worked with the magazine where I handled digital campaigns. We'd crossed paths before, mostly in meetings or quick editorial briefs, but he was one of those people who filled a room without trying. Not in the way Daniel did, but in a kind of electric way. Like there was always some inside joke he was waiting to tell you. At first, I barely noticed him beyond the polite banter. But then, everything changed one random Monday. We were launching a community spotlight campaign, and I was assigned to partner with him on the visual direction. That meant weekly check-ins, location scouting, editing sessions in the office well past 7 p.m. He'd sit at the edge of my desk, legs stretched out, camera around his neck, offering me sips of his oat milk lattes and stories about weird shoots he'd done. He had so many stories. My favorite was the one where a guy trained hawks to deliver wedding rings. Obviously, the guy only had limited success. I laughed. I actually laughed. It was the first time in months I remembered what my own laugh sounded like. Evan asked questions no one else did anymore. Not even Daniel. What kind of music did you grow up with? Have you ever left the country? What's your dream city to live in? Questions that felt like windows back into parts of myself I didn't realize had been closed because of Dan's illness. I told myself the attention felt good because it was harmless. I still think so. I mean, it had to be because it was safe. Evan didn't know anything about me. He didn't know about Daniel, about the chemo, about the person I was becoming. Around him, I didn't feel like a caregiver or a wife or someone slowly crumbling under the weight of her husband wasting away. I just felt like a person I can now admit was falling in love. The first time something crossed the line, it was a Thursday. I'll never forget. It was late evening. Daniel was being watched by a friend of ours while I finished up at work. I was already not looking forward to having to go home and take care of Dan. In fact, I was looking for reasons to go home later. Evan and I were at the office reviewing final edits, alone. The lights were dim, and my shoulders ached from hunching over my screen all day. Evan touched my arm, not in a creepy way, and asked, "You okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't. He saw it. He tilted his head and said, "You don't have to lie, you know." I felt something break in my chest, and before I could stop myself, I told him. Not everything, but enough. I told him my husband was sick, that things were hard, that I didn't feel like myself anymore. It was quiet for a while. I was scared to look at him. I thought he'd back off. I expected him to politely shift the conversation, but he didn't. He just looked at me, really looked at me and said, "That sounds lonely." And then he didn't say anything else. Just sat there beside me while I cried into my hands in the empty office. He rubbed my back a couple times and whispered sweet things in my ear. I wish I could say that was the worst of it, but that would be another lie. We started texting. Then texting became FaceTiming. Then coffee on Saturday mornings. Then wine in his apartment on a Wednesday night when I said I was working late. And by then, it was too late to go back. It was inevitable. I knew it was going to happen, and I didn't stop it. I didn't even try. The first time we slept together, I told myself it was just a one-time mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It felt so good, not just physically, but emotionally. It felt like breathing again after being underwater. Daniel was at home, curled under a weighted blanket, battling nausea and bone-deep fatigue. I had helped him brush his teeth that morning, kissed his forehead, and told him I'd be home late. And instead, I let someone else touch parts of me that weren't his to touch. Parts of me he still believed belonged only to him. The affair didn't explode into some dramatic storm. It crept in quietly like water seeping into a cracked foundation. Evan never pressured me, never asked for more than I gave. He just was. He existed in a parallel world where I didn't have to be strong or patient or selfless. And every time I stepped into that world, I hated myself a little more. But I kept going back. So, I'm not blameless in this scenario, I know. At night, I'd lie awake next to Daniel, his back to me, shallow breaths rising and falling. I'd watch his shoulder blades and feel these complicated feelings, grief and guilt, love and shame, all wrapped around each other so tightly I couldn't tell them apart anymore. I resented Daniel so much, but I loved him so much it hurt. I think I convinced myself that Evan was a coping mechanism at best and a distraction at worst. I wasn't leaving Daniel, not really. I was just borrowing a version of myself that hadn't died yet. I had no plans to leave Dan, and I had no plans to ever tell him about the affair. The doctors assured me that Daniel was getting better. I knew I just had to use Evan to cope until my husband was healthy again. Then I could put all this behind me. So that's the plan currently. I know I'm in the wrong subreddit to be posting this, but I really don't care. I just had to get this story out in the world. Any suggestions on how to deal with the crippling guilt I feel? Seriously, y'all, it's eating me alive. I'd like to live one day without this horrible feeling in my chest. Update. 1 week later. Hey everyone. Last Tuesday something happened that stuck in my throat like a stone, and I can't stop playing it over in my head. It started with Evan. We met for lunch. Just sandwiches and Oreo milkshakes on a bench in the park a few blocks from my gym. We talked about small things. Art, travel, some dumb TV show we'd both hate-watched. It was warm, but breezy. One of those days where everything feels lighter, like you could press pause on your life and live in a single afternoon. Up until that moment, I didn't think of Daniel. Later, I felt guilty about that, but not in that moment. Evan finished his milkshakes and took my hand. He didn't say anything. He just held it. It felt good, not hot or urgent like most things were with us. I looked at our hands and realized I hadn't felt that kind of simple human connection in so long. There was this silence between us that didn't need filling. I closed my eyes and for a moment let myself imagine a different life. A life where I wasn't waiting for scan results or managing prescription refills. A life where my husband wasn't sleeping 16 hours a day and vomiting through the other 8. I imagined a life with Evan. A life where we met in college or high school. We had an apartment in San Francisco or Boston. We had kids. We were creatives and had our own magazines. No one was sick and we were happy all the time. Evan leaned over and kissed me on the forehead, just a soft, warm press of his lips. It wasn't a lead-in to anything, just a moment of tenderness. Evan even blushed afterwards. As for me, I felt my heart split in two. When I got home later that evening, Daniel was waiting. He had pulled himself out of bed, out of his usual cocoon of blankets and side effects, and was standing in the kitchen. He looked weak. He was leaning on the counter for balance. He was stirring something on the stove. I smelled garlic, soup maybe. He looked pale but determined. I froze in the doorway. I asked what he was doing. He smiled weakly. "You've been doing everything lately. I wanted to do something for you, even if it's just dinner." There were 2 bowls on the table, candles lit, like they used to be when things were easier. Our favorite playlist humming low from the speaker, the one we used to play on Sunday mornings while making pancakes. I looked around and realized he'd tried to recreate that rhythm we used to have. The rhythm before hospitals, before hair loss, before I started, Then he reached for my hand, the same one Evan had held just hours before, and said, "You look tired. I worry about you." I think I said something like, "I'm fine," or "work was long," but my voice cracked halfway through. I went to the bathroom and cried, quietly, mouth covered. Because the man I loved more than anyone was still fighting to be someone for me, even as his body betrayed him. And I had betrayed him first. I keep asking myself, how do you sit across from someone who's using every ounce of strength to show up for you, knowing you've already left pieces of your heart elsewhere? How do you live with that? That Tuesday broke me. For a few hours, I felt what happiness might look like with someone new, and then I came home and remembered why I ever believed in love in the first place. Daniel's trying to survive, so I've made a decision. After I post this, I'm going to end my affair. It's not fair to either Evan or Dan. I do not want to be this version of myself anymore. Evan deserves someone who loves him outside of certain hours. Dan deserves a loyal wife. Hold the advice. I know exactly how to go about it, and my mind is made up. Thanks, Reddit, but I never want to come back here. Update 1 year later. Hi, guys. Feels kind of weird to be here again. I thought once I ended the affair, I could put it all behind me like it was a chapter I'd closed. But here I am, a full year later, and it still lives in me. Daniel got better. It was messy and terrifying, and so slow. But eventually we turned a corner. It started with his appetite. I'll never forget the first morning he asked me if we still had peanut butter in the pantry. It felt like such a stupidly small question, but I just stood there blinking at him like he'd announced he was running a marathon. I remember scrambling to make him a sandwich and then crying in the kitchen because he ate the whole thing, like every bite was a tiny miracle. The hair came next, thin at first, patchy, like a teenager's. He used to joke that he looked like a half-baked boy band reject, but I'd catch him in the mirror more often, tilting his head this way and that, quietly studying the return of his reflection. Then he started walking more, taking the stairs again, asking about work. I could see him reaching back toward the man he used to be, and every step forward felt like an answered prayer. We had this morning ritual for a while, where he'd sit on the porch with a blanket and a cup of herbal tea, and I'd join him before I left for work. Sometimes we didn't even talk. We just sat there side by side. I remember thinking, maybe this is what forgiveness looks like. I was wrong. Forgiveness hadn't even entered the room yet, because about 7 months after I ended things with Evan, Daniel found out through a Snapchat notification. A photo, something I should have deleted and didn't. He asked me about it one night while we were brushing our teeth, casually at first. "Hey, who's this?" I remember the way my heart stopped, how the toothbrush suddenly felt too heavy in my mouth. I told him it was an old work contact, which was true, but it felt brittle. His eyes lingered on me for a second too long, and I think we both knew, even before I said another word. The next night he sat me down. He said, "Maria, just tell me, please." I told him everything. He didn't interrupt. He didn't ask questions. When I finished, he just stared down at his hands. He didn't sleep in our bed that night, or the night after. He moved into the guest room. I would pass the closed door in the morning and feel like I was walking by a tombstone. He didn't shout or storm out or throw anything. That would have almost been easier. Instead, he went quiet in a way I had never seen him. He stopped letting me do things for him, wouldn't let me drive him to his follow-ups, canceled our couple's brunch with friends, ate meals standing at the kitchen counter instead of sitting across from me. The intimacy we'd rebuilt, however fragile, was gone in an instant. And the worst part, I couldn't blame him. After about a week, he started talking to me again. Small things at first. "We're out of coffee. The doctor called. You left your charger in the living room." But it was like talking through glass. I wanted to ask if he still loved me, but I didn't. I didn't want to make him carry the weight of comforting me too. Eventually, he asked if I would go to therapy with him. I said yes before he finished the question. Therapy has been brutal, stripping yourself down in front of someone else while they name the damage you've done. There were sessions where Daniel barely spoke, others where he cried, some where I cried. Our therapist said the most dangerous thing couples do is not communicate, so we started. I told him I had wanted to run, that I did run, that for a while I felt like I was mourning a husband who was still alive, and that I had hated myself so much for feeling that. Daniel told me he felt like he had died twice, once to cancer, and once when he realized I'd disappeared before his eyes. We're separated. That surprised our friends, but when they heard the story, they agreed it was for the best. We probably will get divorced. I am at a friend's house while I debate whether or not to call my lawyer. Daniel and I don't have joint anythings, so I probably won't lose much if we do get divorced. For now, almost all our friends are on his side. They see me as some kind of monster for cheating on a sick man. I guess I am. There are still hard days. There are nights when I lie in bed and I wonder if he's replaying the old conversations in his head. All the lies, the timing, the quiet betrayals. But there are beautiful moments too. I still see him at therapy. Just like I fought to stay by his side during cancer, I want to stay on his side through this. Last month, we waited in the therapist's office for an hour, and he smiled at me. I've been clinging on to that smile like a lifeline. I refuse to give up on my marriage. I do not want this separation to be permanent. I want Daniel, and I'm willing to fight for him. I just hope he doesn't divorce me. I haven't seen or spoken to Evan since I ended it. I've left that chapter closed, and I have no plans to ever reopen it. Whatever we had, it wasn't worth the damage it caused. I don't regret the clarity it gave me, but I regret every choice that brought me to the edge of losing the only person who ever truly saw me. So, that's the update. Daniel is in remission now. He's still tired sometimes. He gets winded faster than he used to, but he's alive. He's here, and every day I wake up and thank a universe I don't always believe in that I get another chance to show up better than the day before. I'm fighting. I'm still his primary caregiver, so I hope we stay together. That's it. That's all for now. Bye.